Thank you. I'd like to thank Professor Holslag for the perfect setup. Yeah, there's no way I can disappoint after that. I would just like to add one part to his analysis of China's strategic vision. He talked very much about the value chain approach, the manufacturing side. But there are two other very important elements of their vision. The second being IPR, patents, the knowledge, and they're putting lots of people to study the right kind of things, metallurgy, materials science. They are really, really ahead of the rest of the world in this space. So they're occupying the knowledge and making themselves own the licenses that the rest of the world will have to pay for. And the third element is standards, right? They've already occupied the chair of around 60 ISO standardization committees, and they've just rolled out a new, very ambitious standardization strategy. End of comment on Professor Holslag's presentation. I'm going to say what I think are the key challenges, secondly, what the EU is doing about them, and thirdly, tell you a couple of short stories, some concrete examples. Challenge number one, the critical raw materials, the access to the critical raw materials today is a geopolitical challenge of the first order. We said so much in the European Green Deal strategy, where we set out this very ambitious strategy of ecological transformation of the European economy. But there's a key paragraph which says it's not possible unless you have access to sustainable primary and secondary raw materials. It's a security issue, resource security. And every time in history, it's been the same story, whether you talk about who controls salt, who controls gold, silver, iron ore, natural rubber, whatever it might be. It's always been a geopolitical thing which has produced wealth, has really sort of driven innovation, has created power. But on the other side of the equation, it has always led to environmental damage, human cost, and conflict. So there's a plus and minus to the whole thing. So we have a geopolitical challenge of resource security and competition, but we also have a challenge which is, are we exceeding the planetary boundaries? So the whole sustainable development goals, can we afford the same demand side nonchalance as we've had in the past? The answer is clearly no. We have to get a grip on the whole sustainability, resource management and resource efficiency. And my personal view is the whole climate debate focuses too much on trying to eliminate the greenhouse gas emissions without looking at where you put the pressure in the economy instead. And the pressure is put on the materials side, actually. So those two things need to come together. Right, what's the EU doing? As Professor Holslag has correctly said, we've been working on this for 15 years and achieved nothing. I think things are changing. So if you look at the European Union's industrial strategy from March 2020 and its update from May this year, you'll see that we're really focusing on identifying our strategic dependencies, of which raw materials, batteries, hydrogen are 3 of the 5 areas we've gone into in depth, and looking at the strategies and actions to mitigate those risks. We also have really emphasized the concepts of resilience and building strategic autonomy. And you only have to look around at non-raw material issues to see that things are really different now. Look at what's happened in the last year on European action on vaccines, what's happening now on European action on semiconductors. There's a real appreciation that we've outsourced far too much of what is of strategic importance to our own future. So back in September 2020, we came out not only with our latest 3-yearly assessment of criticality, which looks at a range of 85 things, including sand, by the way, as response to a previous question, but we came out with an action plan which tries to do 4 things: build resilient value chains, look at how we can do the resource management, circularity side of things, what we can do better domestically, and how we diversify internationally. One of the actions we did was set up the European Raw Materials Alliance. I see Stefano is here somewhere. Where is Stefano? There he is. He's from the EIT Raw Materials, which is managing that alliance on our behalf. We've given them the task of bringing bringing people together along the value chain, including from countries we would like to source from. We've asked them to develop investment pipelines and to identify bottlenecks in key areas. And we asked them to start off with rare earths and permanent magnets. So we're also looking at the whole investment side. And we've just set up a task force with the EIB and the EBRD to help identify the criteria which they will use to fund, give public funding to the best projects coming out of the Raw Materials Alliance and Battery Alliance investment pipelines. We're doing a lot of work on R&I through the Horizon program to develop secondary raw materials, cleaner mining technologies. I won't go into detail on that. Domestic mining, we're going to have to do it. My commissioner said as much in June. It's irresponsible to expect that we can use in our economy things which are exclusively sourced from countries less able to manage these things responsibly than ourselves. And to help in that area, we have recently published principles on sustainable raw materials in Europe with the help of member states, industry, and civil society. And I encourage you to take a look at those. On the international front, we have been doing a lot of international cooperation, including with the OECD, the World Bank, EITI, various other initiatives. But we've also been very busy developing strategic partnerships. So we've already signed strategic partnerships with Canada, so an advanced, mining experienced, similar country to us in terms of values, a reliable partner. We've also signed one with Ukraine, our neighborhood. It's in our interest to integrate that country with our economy, particularly in view of potential loss of gas revenues. And we're about to negotiate one with Serbia for the same reasons. And in response to the lady who was asking about Africa, we're just about to invite several African countries that have not yet been totally taken over by China, if they would like to engage with us in helping to develop their raw material value chains. And I say value chains, we don't want to just be talking about the traditional extractive model from colonial days, but at the same time bringing through the global gateway approach announced by President von der Leyen, a new way of doing business where we can help with soft and hard infrastructure. We can look at how we can help them to do their industrialization in a cleaner way, making advantage of some of the clean steel and clean cement technologies that we're developing in Europe at the moment. Now, to close with a couple of stories. Magnesium. This is keeping me awake at night at the moment because of the high energy prices, which has caused major disruption around the world. Our supply of magnesium has stopped. Europe has consistently said that magnesium is a critical raw material, and because we've done nothing about it, we find ourselves 95% import dependent on China. And a few weeks ago, China just stopped production of magnesium. So we're running out of inventory in the aluminium sector because this magnesium goes to make alloys, which are used for car bodies, but for packaging and a variety of other applications. So the supply chain effect kicks in very quickly. So just yesterday, we were negotiating with the Chinese Ministry of Industry, which, as Professor Holslag can imagine, was a rich and entirely fruitful experience. We have no control over what they decide to do. So earlier this week, we sat down with European industry and said, do you want to stay in this position? Or why don't you think about a resilience investment plan of where we can reshore? Because we used to have this capacity. We had it in France, we had it in Norway, and in fact we have resources which are almost ready to go in Romania. So why do not invest in this? The cost of investing in resilience is less than the cost of disrupted supply chains as we experience now. Finally, a quick word on rare earths and permanent magnets, which has been the permanent subject of discussion. We are very grateful to the European Raw Materials Alliance and its membership for delivering to us an action plan a few weeks ago, which we are looking at very carefully, and there's a number of elements which we really do need to act on. Investment. We need to get downstream sectors like the automotive sector, the wind sector, the digital sector, and the defense sector to commit to support the building of a European value chain, which, yes, products will cost more than China production, but that's because we do it in a way which is more responsible and internalizes the environmental and social costs. So expect some action on that front in the coming weeks. Final remarks. 2, I am concerned about a potential risk of conflict between different regions of the world, and there is an absence of global governance apart from, as you were saying, in the deep seabed arena, but for the rest, there is no global governance. And indeed, is there a capacity to rein in the ambitions of regions of the world, such as China? I'm not so sure. Second risk of overstepping our planetary boundaries. But at the same time, I say to those civil society organizations who say, you do not need any primary mining anymore, I have to say humbly, I think you're wrong. I think we need a combination of changing demand patterns, doing much more to capture the value that's already in the economy through recovery and recycling. But I think we're also going to need to have primary mining both outside and inside Europe. And the challenge is to make sure we do this with a much lower climate, environmental, and social footprint. Thank you very much.